Have you ever had one of those moments, the kind that makes the air go still, where the world seems to hold its breath for a second around you, and you can only think, is this real? I'm not talking about small coincidences like bumping into a friend unexpectedly. I'm talking about moments where the gears of the universe seem to click in a way that feels impossible. Moments so statistically absurd, they whisper that there might be a story written between the lines of our lives. Today, I have three such stories for you. First, we'll witness the final, synchronized breaths of two of America's founding fathers. Bitter rivals turned faithful friends who departed the world on the exact same day, the 50th anniversary of the nation they'd built together. Then we'll meet a man who moved his family 120 miles to outrun a war, only to have that same war find him and end, quite literally, in his new living room. And finally, a story of two friends torn apart for nearly half a century. And they find each other at the precise instant one of them is recounting the day they saved each other's lives. These are not just oddities of history. They are moments that blur the line between random chance and something that feels a lot more like destiny. Before we go any further, I'm Matt, and this is Strange Ordinary. Twice a week, I share stories pulled from the darkest corners of reality. Strange things that happen to ordinary people. The kind that stay with you when the lights go out. So if you're into that, bolt your doors, check under your bed, and hit subscribe because you won't want to miss the next one. Our story begins not with politics, but with a powerful friendship between two of the most brilliant minds of their time, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. They were brothers in arms working shoulder to shoulder in the crucible of revolution. Their shared dream of America forged in fire and ink as they drafted the Declaration of Independence. But greatness often carries with it the seeds of conflict. As the nation they helped create took its first steps, their visions for its future diverged, pulling them in different directions. The Federalist and Democratic Republican parties became fierce political rivals, their public disputes and private resentments carving the very first battle lines in American political history. And with that, their friendship was shattered. Then, as the years softened them and the fires of ambition cooled, something remarkable happened. A letter was sent, then another, and another. Across the miles, through deeply moving correspondence, the two old revolutionaries began to carefully stitch their broken friendship back together. They became elderly pen pals bound by a shared love for a country that they had helped build. By 1826, both men were frail, their bodies failing, yet it seemed like they were both holding on, clinging to life for one last sacred milestone. The 50th anniversary of American independence. That date, July 4th. Imagine the air in Quincy, Massachusetts that day, thick with summer heat and the distant pop, pop, pop of celebratory fireworks. Inside, John Adams lay dying, his breaths shallow. Miles away, in his home in Monticello, Virginia, Thomas Jefferson's life was also fading. They were in separate states, unaware that their final hours were unfolding in perfect, haunting synchronicity. Just after noon on that historic day, Thomas Jefferson, the author of the Declaration, drew his last breath. Hours later, hundreds of miles away, John Adams stirred. And with his last ounce of strength, he whispered a final mistaken comfort. Thomas Jefferson survives. He died believing his friend had outlived him, never knowing Jefferson had already been gone for hours. The date was July 4th, 1826, exactly 50 years to the day that their shared history was signed into existence. When the news spread, it was seen as a sign, a moment of divine poetry. Statisticians will tell you that the odds are impossibly low, but never zero. Was this just a 1 in a million chance, or was it something else? A final cosmic signature on the story they wrote together. Next, we meet a man who wanted nothing to do with history or legends. All Wilmer McLean wanted was peace. He was a grocer from Virginia, content with the simple dream of running his farm and raising his family in quiet obscurity. But fate, it seems, had a twisted sense of humor. In the summer of 1861, the American Civil War ignited, and its first major land battle, the Battle of Bull Run, erupted quite literally on Wilmer McLean's property. His quiet life was obliterated overnight. Imagine the whistle of cannonballs soaring over your home, the smell of gunpowder choking the air where your crops once grew. His barn was turned into a field hospital echoing with the groans of the wounded, and his home was commandeered as a Confederate headquarters. His dream of a peaceful life had become a nightmare. Wilmer had seen enough. He packed up his family, determined to find a place so remote, so untouched, that the war would never find him. They traveled 120 miles south, settling in a tiny, sleepy village called Appomattox Courthouse. For a while, it seemed to have worked. He had found his sanctuary. 4 years passed. The brutal war that had scarred the nation was finally sputtering to a close. The Confederate General Robert E. Lee was ready to surrender to the Union General Ulysses S. Grant. They just needed a quiet, dignified place to sign the papers. A messenger was sent ahead to the village of Appomattox Courthouse. He knocked on the door of the first suitable home he found. Imagine the look on Wilmer McLean's face. The weary expression of a man who just wanted to be left alone, slowly freezing into disbelief as he recognized the uniform and then the request. Not again. It couldn't be. He had run 120 miles, found the quietest corner of Virginia he could, and still the war had followed him. The conflict that began in Wilmer McLean's front yard in 1861 officially ended in his front parlor in 1865. Our final story is one of those tales often told among veterans, so incredible that even if parts have blurred in retelling, the heart of it captures what coincidence really feels like. It starts in 1940 with two young Texas Rangers, Royce Burton and his partner, Joe. They were inseparable. More than partners, they were brothers. Their bond forged under the vast Texas sky and proven in moments of shared danger, like the time they saved each other's lives during a treacherous fall from a cliff. But then World War II tore them apart. Sent to different corners of the globe, they lost contact in an era long before instant communication. The years washed over them like a slow river, and their shared history faded into a distant, treasured memory. Nearly 50 years went by. Then in 1989, an elderly Royce Burton stood before a college class in New Jersey giving a guest lecture on teamwork. To make his point, he began to tell the story of his days as a ranger. The air in the classroom was still, the students listening as he passionately described the harrowing cliffside rescue, the very moment his partner Joe had saved his life, and he had saved Joe's. And then a sound. The soft creak of the classroom door opening, the shuffle of a footstep, and every head in the room turned. The scrape of a chair leg on the linoleum floor echoed in the sudden silence. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the hall light, was another old man wearing a cowboy hat. On his face, a look of recognition that had crossed 50 years to get there. Think about the sheer impossibility. After nearly half a century of silence, Joe had decided on a whim to find his old friend. He'd spent weeks following a faint trail through old records, a journey that led him across 3 states, and on a pure hunch, he walked through that specific door at the exact impossible second that Royce was telling a room of strangers about the most profound moment of their friendship. The timing was so perfect it feels scripted. The students, realizing they were witnessing a miracle, rose to their feet in a wave of stunned, thunderous applause. The two old friends reunited after 49 years. Finally, they got to have that barbecue that they'd always talked about, picking up right where they'd left off. They say fate favors those who act. Maybe that means your future depends on whether you click the like button and subscribe while you're at it. That might be the one choice you make today that echoes forever. So, there you have it. The synchronized deaths of 2 presidents. A man who couldn't outrun a war, and a reunion so perfect it defies all odds. 3 stories that feel a little too neat, a little too poetic to be random. Now, a scientist will tell you our brains are wired to find patterns in chaos, a phenomenon called apophenia. It's why we see shapes in clouds or hear voices in static. Our minds crave a narrative. But maybe, just maybe, the patterns are really there. In 1941, Soviet archaeologists opened the tomb of the conqueror Tamerlane, ignoring a carved warning that whoever did so would unleash a terrible war. 2 days later, Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa. the largest invasion in human history against the Soviet Union. On March 12, 1951, two brand new comic strips, both titled Dennis the Menace, debuted on the exact same day in the UK and the US, created by two different artists who had never met. And of course, there are the dozens of eerie parallels that connect the lives and assassinations of Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy. In the end, whether you believe in math or you believe in mystery, these stories prove one thing. Our reality is far stranger than fiction. So now I want to ask you, what's the most incredible coincidence you've ever experienced? Let me know in the comments below. If you made it this far, you'll want to hear the next one. It's about a political assassination and the ghosts that still haunt these old prison walls. Click here and I'll see you there.